Hello and welcome back to FATBOSS TV. Today we're looking at the final boss in Ny'alotha with Ny'alotha the Corruptor.
This free-phase encounter was pretty tough on the PTR and sadly we didn't get to see the entire fight, but this video should give you a really solid idea of how the encounter works, just so you're ready for when it hits live servers in around a week or so. Now there's quite a lot to go over, so let's just jump straight in.
So to start off, sanity is involved in this encounter. Just like the carapace of Ny'alotha, you have an extra resource bar showing your sanity, and if it ever reaches 0, you'll gain 100% damage and healing buff for 20 seconds. After that point, you'll become mind controlled, which obviously isn't great. So to gain your sanity back, you can use your extra action button. While standing still, this will restore 80 sanity over 4 seconds. So let's go from the very beginning of the fight. So on the pool, the entire raid will be dragged into the Mind Realm. In here, you'll have Psychus and a load of exposed synapses around the room. Once Psychus reaches full energy, he'll begin to cast Manifest Madness. This causes him to take 99% reduced damage whilst he channels massive raid-wide damage and drains sanity, so if this goes off, it's practically a wipe. You have to kill him before this is cast. The issue is that he's got a ton of health, however the synapses are here to help you. Whenever you kill a synapse near Psychus, he'll gain a 50% damage taken increase for 20 seconds, and this stacks. But do note that once you kill one synapse, all other synapses will heal to max health. So the strat here is to move the boss from tentacle to tentacle, killing them off one at a time until you have 5, 6 or even 7 stacks on Psychus, then you can just turn to him and nuke him down. One thing that complicates this a little bit is that the boss will be casting Anguish that spawns a huge patch on the ground that grows over time. It deals incredibly high ticking damage and removes sanity to anyone stood within it. So you need to be really quick when killing these synapses and make sure you don't stand in any patches that the boss leaves behind. Now whilst this is going on, Psychus will be hitting the tanks with Mind Rack, dealing a large burst of physical damage and debuffing you with an increased physical damage taken debuff for 14 seconds. Whilst testing you could kick this, but we have a sneaking suspicion that this won't be the case for live, so instead just taunt every 14 seconds when your debuff drops. Also the synapses will be casting on random players within 30 yards, dealing increasing ticking damage to them. This can be largely ignored as long as the synapses are dying pretty quickly. Also, whilst you're within the Mind Realm, occasionally you'll take a small amount of damage and lose 5% sanity every second over 3 seconds. There's no way of avoiding this, but it just encourages you to hurry up. Once you've killed Psychus, Ny'alotha is stunned and can take damage for 30 seconds before becoming immune again. You however need to leave the Mind Realm first by clicking on your character copy, which is located where you first entered the realm. If you're too slow to leave the realm, you'll instead be instantly killed.
After the stun times out, the room is filled with corrupted neurons, which gain a growing patch of anguish around them that removes sanity and deals damage. However, damaging them reduces the size of this patch significantly. At the same time, the boss will cast Mind Grasp. This either drags players towards him or pushes them away. You can see which way you're about to be dragged, as there will be shadowy animations coming off your character that will be flowing either towards the boss or they'll be flowing away from him. If you get caught by the boss, he acts like a big anguish zone, so that's really bad. You don't want to be gripped into that for 5 seconds. And behind you is also another anguish zone, so you need to make sure you position yourself accordingly based on which way you're about to be dragged. Shortly after that, a bunch of tentacles will spawn. Basher tentacles need to be tanked, otherwise they'll deal raid-wide damage with their blast. Whilst tanking them, they'll cast Void Flash at you. This deals a burst of initial damage and then even more over 6 seconds to the tank. This damage is increased over time as the tentacle gains a 3% stacking damage increase with each melee hit they do. As for the Corruptor tentacles, they'll cast Corrupted Mind. This is an interruptible cast that debuffs a random player, applying a moderate damage dot. If this isn't dispelled, then it will also drain 15 sanity, so it's vital that this is kicked or dispelled if not. As for the Spike tentacles, they do very little, they just flail about dealing light damage to random players. So you'll want to kill the Bashers, then the Corruptors, and then the Spikes. Now when a tentacle dies, it's noted in the dungeon journal that a load of debris from the tentacle will spawn throughout the room. We never saw this, it never happened, so we can't really say how that works, but we assume it's just going to be targeting circles that you need to move from, and if you don't, they do a large amount of damage and will drain sanity from you. Now whilst you're killing all the tentacles, Ny'alotha is dealing light ticking damage to the raid every second, and also debuffing players with paranoia. This debuff links you with another player, and whilst you're stood further than 5 yards away from them, you take ever increasing ticking damage, so you've got to be quick to meet up with them. To add, players who aren't linked with you, if they stand too close to you, then they'll cause the paranoid players to drain 5 sanity every second, so it's vital that you keep away.
Now let's get to the hard part of this phase. So the boss will open the Mind Gate twice. This allows players to move into a circle, and they are then taken into the Mind Realm and get to play out phase 1 again. The issue is that once you've gone in once, you can't go back in again, so this forces you to make 2 teams, one to go in the first time and one to go in the next. This is where we struggled, as we didn't always have the damage to kill Sycus in time, because he still has the same amount of health as phase 1, meaning that he is going to channel Manifest Madness, which is a wipe. And of course, if nobody goes in, he'll just cast Manifest Madness anyway. Now, the only difference in the Mind Realms for phase 2 is that 2 different events will be going on within them. Within the first Mind Realm of phase 2, Cataclysmic Flames will be going on. It's something to do with Deathwing. What this mechanically means is that you need to be dodging circles, or you'll be losing 20 sanity and be disoriented for 6 seconds, so just move from fire. In the second Mind Realm of phase 2, this wasn't actually working correctly, but it is listed in the dungeon journal that you'll be debuffed with Tread Lightly, which makes it so when you move, you take a small amount of damage until you stop moving. So the idea is that you just minimize the amount you move, or just do your movement in small bursts so the healers can keep up. But once you're able to do both phases, the boss should then transition into the final phase.
In this phase, he'll continue to drag you around with a Mind Grasp, and he'll still debuff players with Paranoia. What's new is that he'll debuff players with Evoke Anguish, which deals large damage and spawns anguish zones that you've seen throughout the fight after it expires that will begin to grow. And each time this ability is cast, it sounds like the pools just get bigger and bigger, acting as some form of pseudo-enrage. The boss also now has a beam that he fires out at a random player that seems to fear people for 4 seconds if you get caught, as well as doing a shitload of damage. And to add, there's also a Thought Harvester ad that you need to deal with. This guys will hit the tanks with Mind Rack, just like Sycus, but most importantly, he will cast Harvest Thoughts. This deals massive damage to all players within 15 yards and also drains 100 sanity divided by all the targets. If this ability is avoided, then the entire raid will lose 50 sanity, so you need a minimum of 5 players to deliberately get hit to avoid that from happening. But that, as far as we're aware, is the encounter. What do we think?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. It's got a nice little phase structure going on, where phase 1's basically a tutorial, so everyone knows what's going on during the Mind Realm. Then phase 2, you could argue that upstairs dealing with tentacles is maybe a little bit slow and a little bit boring, but when you go back into the Mind Realm, it is very, very intense. And I think, arguably, it's maybe too difficult. At least it was on the PTR. Like, you had to min-max your damage so much to get it done. You know, you need to constantly do synapses, one after another, after another, after another, and then blast the boss with all of your cooldowns. And, you know, that's fine. That should be how the mechanic works, but you shouldn't have to do it, like, perfectly to get through it every single time. A lot of guilds were struggling with this as well. It was a very, very difficult task to achieve. So although I do like the kind of idea that Sycus is still just as strong, maybe his health shouldn't be as high as it was. Once again, that could just come down to tuning. One thing I am excited to see is all the different ways people are just going to try and stack this damage increase on that ad, because there's so many different routes. The entire room's basically filled with these synapses, so you're going to see loads of different routes that people are taking, because although you could just keep moving in from one to another, you've got to try and think ahead of time, because you need to get out of the realm, and you don't want to have to run through anguish zones to do it. So one thing that we were always doing is like tanking him at the side of the room, dragging him along, and then kind of backtracking on himself. At least that's what it was doing in phase 1, and that made it so that it was always able to get out very, very quickly.
Yep.
But in phase 2, it felt like we needed more synapses, so we always ended up in a really shit position at the end if we managed to kill him. So yeah, there's definitely some more work to be done there, I'm sure, just to make that whole thing a little bit more efficient.
But speaking about outside the Mind Realm in phase 2, it does feel quite boring because there is only tentacles to deal with. Maybe with that debris mechanic actually working, that might mix it up a bit. But one thing I would say that I think's a little odd, you only ever see the neurons and the Mind Grasp 3 times in that phase, right at the start, and you see it after every Mind Realm is done. How much more interesting would the encounter be if it happens, say, every 30 seconds in that phase?
Well, thanks for giving Blizzard an idea for Mythic, and it's going to make it hellish. Talking about the Mind Grasp, though, I love the way that they display how that mechanic's going to work, as in the shadows being dragged in a certain direction. You just got to look at your character. Once again, it's similar to the whole slamming of the tentacles sort of thing that was done on the previous boss on Carapace. So I kind of like the fact that they're not just using giant circles and loads of arrows pointing at them and all that kind of shit. It's a little bit more kind of organic and thematic, I suppose, the way that they're showing those abilities. So yeah, although phase 2 is a little bit like Gahoon and you're just sitting there hoping that the Orb people or the Mind Realm people now are doing their jobs while you're killing tentacles, hopefully it isn't too bad, and hopefully this boss does turn out to be something good and not like a Xavius, but I guess we'll find out.
But thank you very much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this boss preview, then do drop us down a like. It helps us out a lot. And before you go, if you do have the time, we definitely recommend checking out all of our guides over on Wowhead. Whenever any changes are made to any of the bosses in Ny'alotha, you'll be able to see them there very quickly, as well as any new strategies that are formed as the weeks progress. So definitely go check that out. Link for that can be found in the description below. You may see us again just before the tier comes out. We're going to try and make time for a Lapse episode. If not, we'll just see you in the Heroic Guides as always. Just keep an eye out on the channel. But until then, have a good tier, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.